All right, happy Friday, everybody. Hope everybody's having a nice day. It's nice and sunny out there. Before I hand it over to Michelle, I want to remind everybody that there are two platforms on how agents can make a little bit of side cash um, by just simply referring other agents that you know in the industry that are maybe perhaps thinking of switching brokerages, or they're not happy where they're at. I'm sorry. Can everybody mute themselves, please? Here, Cecilia, I'm going to mute you. Anyhow, if you know anybody in the industry that is looking to make a move, send their info over to either myself or Doug so we can have a little chat with them, okay? There's a way for you to get some referral income, both on a brokerage level and a corporate level. So just keep that in mind, okay? All right, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Michelle so she can go over the letter of intent commercial training. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody, and good Friday morning. We're going to review the letter of intent. Somebody asked, and this is a good segue into the leasing that the AIR leasing that we will be reviewing, I believe in March. We'll be doing Friday training on the AIR leasing. So a letter of intent is a document that kicks off the negotiation, and you type a clause at the end of the LOI, making it non-binding. And letter of intent, LOI, most of the time you're going to hear people referring to it as LOI, so that stands for letter of intent. So it's merely a document, and you would put this on letterhead that kicks off the negotiation between the lessor and the lessee. So let's go over it. So you're going to address it to the lessor. You're going to tell them which property you're issuing this letter of intent on. You're going to give a little bit of a background. I didn't put much here, but usually if you don't have a website of the corporation that is going to, or entity that is going to submit the LOI, you want to put a little bit of background or have them send you a paragraph about their company or any website that the lessor can look at to learn a little bit more about them. So this is short here because I didn't add things, but you would want to put some information there, or you could put an attachment with their website or information about them. So you always want to reference, again, even though it's up here, the address that the prospective lessee is looking to lease. The business use in this particular sample is a restaurant. The term of the lease, you always want to put that in. Option to renew, 160-month option, 5 years. So the commencement date, you want to put that in. Sometimes the commencement date and the rental commencement date is going to be different if you have some rental abatement months in here. So you always have the unit here, but it's always approximately, because I could measure a unit, you could measure a unit. It's going to turn out a little bit differently. Sometimes the assessor's data may not be completely updated, or there's been some additions or subtractions. So we always want to say that the unit is approximately the square footage. Base rental rate, you want to put the whole thing there, that is $5 per square feet. So 5 times the approximate square foot is 10,670. The CAM fee or triple net fee is 50 cents per square feet. So that's an additional 1,067. Total base rent and CAM is 11,737 monthly. You want to spell it out, I think, in this manner so that everybody's aware of the charges. And the security deposit, of course, that is up to the lessor, but generally they're going to look for, of course, they're going to review their application package, but they're going to look for equal to 2 months, including a CAM fee. So this should say lessor, excuse me, I didn't catch that, but total due at signing is 35,211. You want to make sure to include that, because you want to have your prospective tenant prepared to have that cashier's check ready at lease signing. So rental increase, I put 3% annually. The landlord will counter anything on here that they need to counter. So you can put a rental increase of 3% annually or whatever in that box. Rental abatement. So if you're putting a rental abatement in your letter of intent and you intend it to be including the CAM fee, make sure you write that in on your letter of intent, because if you put 3 months, it may be assumed that you're just asking for the base rent. So if you mean base rent plus CAM fee, please put that in. If you just mean the base rent, you could put 3 months and leave off the including CAM fees. So tenant improvements, especially on a restaurant site, the landlord may offer some TI funds, and we call it TI. You'll hear everybody refer to it as TI. So that stands for tenant improvement. And they will provide on this sample 32,000 rent credit or tenant improvement funds. So at their discretion. So the landlord, excuse me, the lessor could either credit the rent or provide them the funds of the 32,000. So that's at, excuse me, I'm sorry, at their sole discretion. So the lessee is going to need to submit, and this is generally speaking, because most landlords want to know what you're doing to their property. You're going to need to submit an improvement plan to the lessor within usually about 30 days of lease execution. And then the lessee is responsible with their contractor for obtaining all the permits, if they're applicable, and any improvement and work is conducted by a licensed contractors. Now, the licensed contractor, the lessor is always going to look for an insurance liability from the licensed contractor, as well as a copy of their contractor license. So just bear that in mind if you're representing the lessee. So maintenance of equipment and building, all the equipment provided to lessee. So a lot of times this happens to be a sample restaurant. There's some equipment left. Sometimes you'll see key money charged, but in this case, there's no key money. So they're leaving the equipment as is, where is. So the lessor shall have the sole responsibility for maintenance of all equipment. I think that should be lessee, but the tenant or the landlord, this is something to agree upon. Usually once the tenant takes possession of a unit, they're going to have the responsibility for maintenance of the equipment. The landlord will usually have the responsibility of exterior of the building, including the roof, and that is their responsibility. So if there's HVAC units in them, one of the things that I've learned over the years is if they do have a unit, sometimes the prospective tenant will want to know the age, which makes sense, and they're going to want to know the tonnage. So you can ask the lessor's representative, or if you're working for the lessor, you can ask them directly. But most prospective tenants, and if you're representing a tenant, find out for them, you know, the age of that unit and the tonnage, so they make sure that it's good for their business or it's not too old. So the lessor in this particular sample is going to professionally service the units and deliver the unit to the tenant. And the HVAC units are warranted for a period of 1 year after lease commencement date. And after that, maintenance and repairs fall to the tenant. So this is why it's so important. Now, you don't have to write this in your LOI, but a lot of times that's in the lease, that it's going to become the tenant's responsibility. So you can have head some things off by finding out the age and the tonnage, and if they have repair records of that unit. These are very expensive on the top of commercial buildings, okay? So that's one thing. And another thing, when you're representing a tenant, just as we do in residential, they can inspect that unit to know what they're going to be getting prior to executing on a lease. So a lot of times you'll see people come in with their contractors. That's a really good idea because you want the prospective tenant to know the condition of that unit, so there's no surprises later. So I do recommend that they inspect the unit. They can bring their own contractor and take a look at everything. So the delivery of the premises is as is present condition. And again, they're stating that the lessor is responsible for roof and HVAC maintenance in this certain one. Usually the HVAC maintenance, again, is going to be the tenant. And replacement. So in some of the leases, you need to really look at if that HVAC unit goes, who's responsible for the cost of replacement, okay? So you read that in your lease documents prior to signing. Parking, I always like to have this because most parking lots are going to be first come, first serve. So sometimes you'll see a greened out 15-minute in and out parking space in front of restaurants. But you want to make sure that the party knows that it is a first come, first serve parking lot unless it's different. So the tenant will be responsible for all utilities to the unit. And for restaurants, they're usually going to be required to provide their own trash container and pickup. So for offices, generally the landlord or lessor will include the trash for an office, but on restaurants, there's usually a clause where the tenant will assume the responsibility for a trash container. Now, some big sites that already are pretty, have all of their trash containers, there's a little bit of cost per square foot. It may be 3 cents, it may be 7 cents to for the landlord to pick up the trash. So these are things I'm just cluing you in. You need to check and make sure that you understand. Now, on a letter of intent, as I said, you're just kicking off the negotiations. When you are working a letter of intent, if you think you're getting close to going to lease, make sure you're asking the listing agent which document they're going to be using. Some will use a car, but most likely you're not going to see a car. You're going to see an AIR lease form. And big projects have their own leases. So if you're getting close to going to lease, you want to make sure that you're talking to the listing agent and ask them if you can start reviewing a draft of the lease, not with all your terms in it, but just what lease they'll be using so that you understand it a little bit. And of course, the tenant is always recommended to have that reviewed by their own attorney, okay? But it's a good practice for us as agents to at least cursory review that and understand and recommend to the tenant that they have their attorney, that they can have their attorney review the document. So there's usually embedded in a lease, the insurance that the tenant shall provide. On restaurants, sometimes it's a little higher. I've seen it recently up to $3 million for the restaurant. And that's probably because there's cooking and fire and all that. But you want to make sure that your client understands that they're going to need to purchase a certificate of insurance of liability for the landlord. And generally, they always name the landlord as an additional insured. And the landlord will want this document prior to lease commencement or prior to giving the tenant the keys. These are easy to get, but I would have your client go ahead with their favorite insurance agent, check the cost and make sure that they understand about obtaining this document. Once that they've selected an agent, you can generally get these within a day or two, okay? So usually on a lease, so you saw up at the top, this was an entity, it's a corporation that's leasing this unit. So you always want to have a guarantor. So the guarantor is going to be an individual. They're going to supply their whole application package. So you see right here, these are always subject to the tenant providing their application package. Now, what does that contain? It's an application. It's usually 2 years of tax returns, both on the corporation, if it's been active for that long, and the individual. And they're also going to look for the most current 2 months of bank statements, 2 to 3 months. So they want to make sure that they have the money coming in to sustain the unit. So you want to make sure that you explain this to your client, that the application package is going to be, and there's also a non-refundable credit fee. So we're going to do a credit application, non-refundable credit fee, credit check fee, 2 years of tax returns, both for the corporation and the individual. And you're also going to supply 2 to 3 months of the most current bank statements, both on the corporation and the individual. Now, sometimes people just form these entities for this particular site. So the corporation may not have tax returns or, bank statements, but you're also going to need to provide the corporate documents like bylaws and things like that, for the landlord to review. And a very important step, even for us, is to make sure that whoever that you're working with is authorized to sign on behalf of that entity. So you'll want, in fact, I'm working on one right now. And I said, do you have the corporate documents to show me that the signer that you're putting up on this lease can actually sign the document? So he sent it to me last night. That will go over to the landlord. So if you can help take some steps to alleviate the landlord from asking you, that would be great. And a lot of this that I'm talking about right now, you can learn day by day. I think like every day we have something new to learn, and we need to be really open to learning. I can't tell you how many times here an agent has asked me a question and I'm thinking, wait, let me think about that. And I start researching. So they're my teacher too. So if we're open to learning, we can learn something new every day. And what I would like to say is, especially if you are new to commercial, please ask. We're more than happy to help you. We have years of experience in sitting in this building. I work for a top agent, as you all know, Shumay Cam. So I've been trained pretty well by her, and I continue to learn from her. So if you're in a transaction, or you're even just at the point of a letter of intent, please come ask us. We're really happy to help you and to see you succeed. Because it's a little bit different than residential if you're trying to make that crossover. So please ask. If you don't, if you have a client and you really feel a little bit nervous about managing the deal yourself, I really recommend that you seek somebody in the brokerage that has commercial experience. We have some good commercial agents here. Team up with them, because they can help you through this deal. You'll learn a lot. And, even if you're sharing commission, they've been a great teacher for you. You've gotten through the deal and you made some commission. So that's always my recommendation. But also, the door's always open here. So you make sure you ask if you feel stumped on any questions on it. So let me get to the bottom of this. So this is the disclaimer here, that this is for discussion purposes only. So this is a non-binding document. This is just to kick off the letter of the negotiation process. Now, these could be countered by the landlord. These can go back and forth a few times. So be prepared for that. So usually you want to have the tenant sign, that they've reviewed this letter of intent, and then you send it off. Make sure when you send it off, you're also mentioning to the client that you're going to need to be collecting that application process, because sometimes you're going to have a corporate package. You're going to have the one I'm working on, there's 5 people. So it takes a while to collect things. So make sure that you're organized, that you're collecting right away for the landlord, so they can make a decision on this letter of intent. So I have a couple of more things to show you, but so far, is there any questions that I can answer? Okay. So I'm going to move on and show you. Okay, go ahead. Okay, I don't hear any questions. So I myself, I'll be very frank, there's times when I'm like, wait, what does that lease type mean? So I typed up this list, and I think it's pretty inclusive. It'll tell you what the types of lease types are for commercial. I typed it up. I'm happy to share it if anybody wants it. I'll supply it to Ruben and he can email it out. But again, this is just my research. I think the best learning is when you research online, but there's so much information out there. Like I'll even every week I look on YouTube, I can find top agents, I can find real estate attorneys to listen to. I'm always listening because you pick up just little tips from people. So next month, we're going to be exploring the lease agreement from AIR. So that's going to be a two-part training because it's pretty meaty, just like the purchase agreement, but we'll learn a lot together on that. But the kickoff generally on the lease agreement is going to be a letter of intent. So get comfortable with that. If you want a copy of my sample, I'm happy to provide it with you. And remember, if there's certain things that are important to the tenant, you can throw a paragraph in your letter of intent about that to notify the other party. So again, it's a non-binding agreement for negotiation. So if anybody wants these pages of what leases, commercial leases mean, it was an article written by, I can't even pronounce it, but here's their name. But I found this article to be one of the best I've read. So are there any questions before I move on to a purchase agreement? I mean, a purchase LOI? Okay. Okay, so sorry, this went a little crooked when I scanned it to myself. So let me just start by saying on a purchase letter of intent, I've seen two schools of thought. You either go straight to contract and just write an offer. Some owners are going to want to look at a letter of intent, but there you could also just write an offer and have all your terms in there. But at any rate, here's a letter of intent that Shimei and I did years ago. So this is up to purchase, and we put the address here, and of course you're going to address it to the owner. So the purchase price shall be, you're going to put the purchase price here, and then you're letting them know that the buyer's intending to obtain a loan for this purchase. But if the need arises, because sometimes in commercial you do need cash, that the buyer will pay cash. And then prior to opening of escrow, the buyer is going to provide the seller with proof of funds. A buyer's cash deposit at opening of escrow is 3%. Now remember, on commercial, the liquidated damages is not capped at 3% as it is in residential. And there's a separate paragraph, as I showed you last time, to put the liquidated damages amount in. But on this one, we were offering 3% of the purchase price upon opening escrow. We've also outlined who we would like the escrow and title to be. So again, you may get a counter from the owner, and then the buyer has 7 days for the due diligence period. So this property, I remember it was smaller. It wasn't a huge commercial property. So beginning upon written acceptance of mutually acceptable purchase agreement by all parties. So this was a small property, so we didn't give a lot of time, but usually for due diligence on commercial, especially on the larger properties, you're going to want 30 days. So, and here we have escrow closes no later than 30 days after the buyer has removed the contingency or waived all of those items I showed you in the purchase agreement. There's many contingencies. So AIR is structured that it closes after the removal of all the contingencies, and it defaults to 30 days. So during the buyer's due diligence period, if the seller had any reports relating to the property, we've asked that they provide them. So after the execution of the contract, we let them know that we would like the right to access the property to perform investigations and inspections. Now this again, is embedded also in the AIR contract, but this is just the initial negotiation letter of intent. So buyer is acknowledging that they're purchasing this property in reliance on their own investigation. And buyer and seller shall each pay standard escrow fees. Now, remember, I showed you that it was already lined out in the AIR, so you're going to want to take a look at that. And seller shall pay the cost for, remember, we learned a title commitment, not a preliminary title, but a title commitment. Okay, so the commission is expressed here. So here we put the commission in. And of course, that would have been shared with the other broker as well, if there was another broker on the other side. And then we put the effective date of the letter of intent and when it will expire. So we both signed it, and then we had the buyers acknowledge it. So this is just a sample, but there's more complex letter of intents. But again, you just want to get the top line terms, because AIR contract, which most commercial deals are going to be done on those, or perhaps, like I said, they have their own contract, that property owner, but just get the top terms in here. And remember, if you're assisting a buyer, an agent just asked me this about a phase one. And I said, well, maybe you should consider it, because it's not just the property with the environmental, it's also the surrounding. So that's always something to consider. So if a buyer is asking your opinion, you can certainly give your opinion on that. I know that most of the properties that I've seen Shumay Cam go into, she does do a phase one. Because it's not just the property, it is the surrounding area. So that's just a little tidbit. So I'm going to exit out of this, and I'm going to ask you, do you have any questions? Okay, I'm going to look at the chat box. Okay, yeah, Kathy, we can send you a copy of the recording. And Diana, you want a copy of the LOI. Is there any other questions?
Michelle, I just want to add one thing. We don't send out a copy of the recordings. The actual recordings will be available later today
Oh, thank
on
you.
our YouTube. So there's no need for distribution of this recording, because you can, at your leisure, at whatever time you want to review this, you just simply go on to our YouTube channel. That YouTube channel is just go to YouTube and then go to CB George Realty. And then you'll have our channel there. And you can scroll to any of our recordings, whether it be a Monday meeting, whether it be a Friday training, a commercial training, or a lunch and learn, okay? So that's where you access all of our recordings.
And I want to mention, when we kick off the AIR training for leasing, I hope that some of you will consider coming in person. Because it's a lot to get through, and the interaction in a room is really good. And you'll hear ideas from other agents with their questions. It'll give you ideas of what to look for. So when we do our AIR lease document training, I hope that some of you will consider coming in person. I will be in the room, and I would love for you to attend. Okay, I thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate it always. It's always my pleasure and honor to be with you.
Also, additionally, I want to remind our agents with us today that Michelle, myself, and Peter are committed to we're going to do one session. It's called a brainstorming every first Thursday of every month for 1 hour between the hours of 3 and 4 p.m. This is an opportunity for any agent, whether you're new to business or experienced, you want to pick our brain, you want to collaborate on what's working out there, what's not working, anything you want to ask. We're here. We're committed to your success, because our success is your success. So that's every first Thursday of the month between the hours of 3 and 4. This is a session that's in person only. So this is not gonna be recorded. It's here to help you agents with whatever you need to get out there and generate or grow your business and stuff, okay? You will be getting a reminder of that session prior to that date, but just mark it in your calendar. It's very easy. Just mark it in your calendar for the duration of 2024. This is a pilot program, okay? If it works out and we get engagement, which we're encouraging our agents to come and engage with us, help your business, okay? Just mark it on your calendar every month and put a reminder. But nonetheless, we'll send you a reminder as well.
When we, I just want to add one thing. When we do the lease, AIR lease training, we're also going to go over invoicing, because a little bit different is that the agents have to invoice for their commission. So we'll go over all of that. That will probably be the second part of the training. But just be prepared, and we're all going to learn a lot together. So I hope that you come in person, because it's really helpful to have that energy in the room and the questions, and that we all have information from each other and learn from each other. So thank you again. I appreciate your time.
No further questions? Okay. Thank you, guys. We'll see you guys next week, next Friday.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye.